Guys, let's jump into part three of our Superman costume analysis, where this week we are going to be looking at the costume of Bob Holliday, Superman from the 1966 Broadway musical It's a Bird, It's a Plane, It's Superman. But let's have a look at the costume. So there we have Bob Holliday in all his glory. Obviously, we most of the images we have are black and white, but we do have some color photos. But let's go through it, looking from head to toe. Well, let's start with the cape like we usually do, and just looking at the cape here, we can see obviously the costume is very nice, red, blues, and yellows. The cape comes up to just the top of the knee, not as low as the George Reeves cape, but obviously not as long as the Man of Steel Henry Cavill cape. What do we think? Do we like where it sits as far as how far down the leg it falls? Oh, did
Did
we
we
lost
lose
Mark?
Mark?
Yeah, it looks like we lost Mark. What about you, Michael? I'll get Mark back on.
Um, I I'm not a big fan of the short cape. However, I think probably for the stage, since it was going to be, it's on Broadway, so it's not like a movie where it's like really up close. I think it probably looks a lot better from a
Mm.
distance. Plus, it's pretty much closer to the comics at the time.
Yep.
So, if we're going to complain about deviating from the source material, I guess we can't complain when they actually do the source material on the stage.
Yeah, exactly. And I like the way that the cape comes in under the top of the costume. It doesn't sit on the
Hmm.
shoulders like the Coke Allen one did, but it actually tucks in underneath the collar and then comes out that way and does go over the shoulders, but still a nice cape. I quite like it. Maybe a little bit longer. I like it to go probably just to the top of the boots myself, midway through the calf muscle. But yeah, it's not a bad cape whatsoever. I don't have any images at the moment to see if it had an S on the back of it, but we'll have a look at that once we go along. Then we get to the body of the costume, and once again, it looks like a woolen type of material. Obviously, lycra, not necessarily a thing too much back in the mid 60s. I don't know when lycra was brought about, but this still doesn't look that form fitting, but nevertheless, still very much the kind of like um, a jump, a pullover, a sweater type thing. But yeah, I think it would probably be pretty warm under the lights of a stage.
Yeah, it was probably cotton. Um, as like you said, spandex wasn't really a big thing at the time. It was starting to creep in, um, but I like the detailing on the cuffs. Uh, kind of similar, not exactly like Kirk Allen's, but there seems to be something more down there than just it just comes to like the end like a drawing.
Mm.
So it's a pretty solid body style. I mean, like I said, it kind of looks like the comics of the time come to life.
Yeah, for sure. Now, looking at the S shield, just going to zoom in there closer on the body of that suit, that photo. This is a great looking S. It's not as angular on the sides as some of the S symbols we've seen. It looks more rounded, but that could just be the position that he's sitting in here. But it's a great looking S, and it's pretty large across his chest.
Yeah, again, I think one of the big reasons for that is if you're in the cheap seats at the theater, you still want to be able to see the S pretty clearly. So having it that big on his chest would make a lot of sense. It is more rounded, and again, that could be partially, but that seems to be in the other shots that I've seen of the Bob Holiday costume. That seems to be
Mm.
pretty much the generally, and I think maybe that had more to do with his body type and the material
Hmm.
than um, like a conscious decision to make it look like that.
Yeah, for sure. So then we move on down to the belt and the trunks here. It's a little bit higher than some of the trunks we've seen, but not as far down at the thigh as Kirk Allen's trunks. They were more like shorts. But yeah, this is pretty much on the mark. And the belt here is interesting because it's got the double oval buckle not just a single
Hmm.
oval like the George Reeves one was very much a gold kind of belt, shiny belt buckle. This is very much consistent with the rest of the belt, whether it's leather or plastic or whatever it is. It's the belt buckle is the same material as the rest of the belt, and yeah, we have that double oval shape.
I think one of the reasons why the trunks sit the way they do is just the build of Bob Holliday. I know you haven't talked about it yet, but like you look at Brandon Routh, for example, and the costume that he wore for Superman Returns, it like accentuated the fact that that man was like 30% torso. Um, whereas Bob Holliday has a more stocky build.
Yeah.
So the trunks are probably going to sit a little higher because of that, because his waist sits higher.
Yeah, exactly. And Mark is having a little bit of technical trouble, so he's just giving us some comments
Oh.
on the side here, saying that he does think that the trunks are fairly faithful to the costume. So he's a fan of the trunks. All right, let's move down to the boots, and this is still very much in the mold of what we saw with both Kirk Allen and George Reeves costumes. We do have that V shape at the front of the shin, which is pretty much stock standard. But again, it looks like that kind of felt type of
Hmm.
Robin Hood belt boot, very much like a ballet dancer type feel to it. But yeah, not necessarily like the leather boot that we'll get to see in future costumes.
Yeah, and again, sound like a broken record here. I think that has a lot to do with the fact that it's on the stage.
Yeah,
Um, I think a leathery boot would probably be too shiny and probably throw off the look of it. Whereas with the kind of the felt material, the light's going to be consistent when it hits it.
yeah, I'm a big fan of the boots to be in that style because I always felt that, like, say, the Brandon Ruth boots, when you get to those later on down the track, they're really chunky and hefty, and you go like, how the
Hmm.
heck did Clark Kent ever fit his work shoes over the top of those? Like, where did they come from? Where you could kind of, this is more like a, not a sock, because you obviously you can't be running around in your socks, but it does have a feel of being a little bit more tight fitting, form fitting, and not necessarily a bulky thing that you could actually see someone having these under their dress shoes.
Hmm. Yeah, he would
So
it'd just be larger size dress shoes than he would normally wear, which would probably make Clark Kent look like he had boat feet. Um,
yeah,
which would probably do better for the secret identity. But
yeah,
no, I kind of dig this felt look. Um, I'm kind of, as I get older, and we see so many iterations of these costumes. I'm kind of attracted to these like 40s and 50s and 60s versions,
yeah. Me too.
uh, j- just because just
The
because they
simplicity.
feel, yeah, and they feel closer to the comics of the time period. You look at like Dean Kane's costume, or even Brandon Routh's. That's not something you would have seen at the in the comics of that time, uh, with the coloring and all that.
Mm,
Oh, that's a sharp. I
that
love
is
look
a
at those
great.
colors popping off of
Yeah,
that.
that is a great photo. It's a high res one that I found. And just looking at the face and the head, and the hair of Bob Holliday, he definitely had the look. He had that macho type of look about him. He had a pretty strong jawline. He had the hair, the wavy hair with the spit curl actually looks realistic. It's not faked. It doesn't look like it's been stuck on his forehead. So, and having met Bob Holliday in his later years, definitely a gentleman, and I was, I always include Bob Holliday in everything we do when we're talking about people who have played Superman, because he definitely has a place in the history of being the only person to have played Superman on Broadway.
Yeah, and it's had a really good baritone voice.
Hmm.
Um, like all I've ever really gotten, because it's all that's really commercially available, was the cast recording. But he definitely had a personality to the character, and it's that's got to be uncomfortable. Um, having attended a production of it back in 1993, it's a show that's just a lot of fun, and I really kind of regret that they didn't film Broadway
Mm,
uh, all that much at that time period, because having a film of the production would have been great, just on a
awesome. Would have
historical
been
level.
for sure. So overall, I'm going to give this like a 7 or 8 out of 10 because I think it's really true to the comic books of the time, and is just a great look overall as a Superman costume.
Yeah, Justin Suarez says skinny legs for a stocky heavy man. He skips leg day. It happens. I mean, you're not supposed to, but
It happens.
and that was actually very common of men, and like what was considered to be like built in the '60s. That having skinny legs but a big like barrel chest
Mm,
was uh, was right on target.
yeah. So that's our costume analysis for this week. Sorry, Mark, that he was having technical
I feel
problems
so
there,
bad.
but yeah, but at least we had a third wing here this week with Michael being able to cover. Otherwise, it just would have been me talking about it on my own. So it happens, unfortunately for Mark this week, but we will get him back in our next part 4 when we will do. I think we're up to Christopher Reeve for the costume
Mm.
analysis in part 4.